Cyberpower PC giveaway is currently running. Click on the link in the description for a chance to win some awesome gaming equipment. Alright, so this game we are looking at a Thresh versus a Rakan Xayah lane, and you're laning with a Twitch. So if you've watched my other coaching sessions that I've uploaded to my YouTube channel, you know that one of the first things that I always say is I have 3 general questions that I ask myself every game. How do you want to play the lane phase? What is your role on the team? And what is your team's win condition? The first question that applies to the game is, how do you want to play this lane phase? So Thresh is obviously a lane bully, so ideally you want to be pretty active in the early game. On the other hand, you guys are looking against a Xayah Rakan lane, which, Rakan isn't necessarily a lane bully, but when he's with Xayah, he can be somewhat of a lane bully. And on top of that, you have Twitch with you, who's more late game focused and isn't going to be necessarily super lane dominant. So I think, you guys are going to be playing, not necessarily passive, but passive. I mean, you still want to be a little bit, willing to make plays, but not so much to the point where you're just constantly looking to make plays. And I'll pause this here so we don't miss anything. So basically, whenever you're in a lane like this, you're not going to force things to happen, but you want to make sure that when you are making plays, that it's either because you're getting a gank or because you landed a hook. There's certain situations. Let's say you're up against a Soraka and a Jinx this lane. You can be super in their face the entire game and not really get too much punished for it. On this hand, you don't have that free will to do whatever you want, so it's going to wait on landing hooks like we just saw there. And
Aftershock is kind of forgiving in that sense too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll also back up just to make sure we didn't miss. Okay, so another thing that I talk about pretty frequently in all of my coaching videos is how important the level 2 is. Yeah. So I would say that in this case, if you pause it right here, you guys aren't really in a position to get the level 2, but that could easily have been fixed earlier into the wave or early into the game.
Had I stacked my charges appropriately.
Yeah, so let's see exactly how you play this out. And actually, I'm going to take back what I said, because what they have the advantage of doing is coming into lane first and controlling this wave. So you don't have really too many options as far as getting level 2 this game. I just wanted to point it out, just to make sure that you are aware of how important the level 2 is.
Yeah, that was something I hadn't known until I watched your video, so it was super helpful.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, in this game, I can't really scold you on it or assure you what you did wrong, because they had the upper hand and they kind of controlled the wave before you had any say on it.
I think that was my thought process too, was the fact that 2 melee and 1 range minion had already died, so we couldn't get the level 2.
So not too much you could do there. Another thing, whenever you're in a lane like this, so like we already kind of established, there's certain lanes that you can be super aggressive in, and I think the lane that we give an example of was Soraka Jinx. And maybe going into this lane, you're not really sure. I kind of already laid it out, how it's going to work, but maybe when you were playing this game, you didn't really know how it was going to play out. So anytime you're unsure of the way a lane is going to play out, you ideally want to do something that I like to call gaining their respect. So basically what you could do is you could walk up super far, maybe look for a trade. If they back off immediately, then okay, they respect me, they're going to back off. And you could use that to your advantage. On the other hand, though, if they decide to fight back and a little trade goes out, then you get to see where exactly you guys stand in this matchup. Maybe you guys win those trades, maybe you don't. So anytime you're unsure of really where you stand in the lane, you can kind of try to gain their respect, either push them out or force them to fight and see how the fights play out.
How much of a risk do you want to take doing that, though? Because Rakan has Ignite, and she's level 2, so they can chain CC.
Yeah, I mean,
probably get
you're not necessarily going to just run straight at them and just be like, okay, I'm just going to face tank them. We're going to all in right here, see if that pays out. It's more or less, go for a trade, see if it pays off. Don't overcommit. Don't be too passive, but kind of just get to understanding where you are. And I would say...
I know Rakan uses Ignite right there.
Yeah. I would also say that when you are trying to check how much they respect you, it's wiser to do that in the early parts of the game, because that's when they have less damage as a whole. If you wait until they back, they might have a pickaxe or a BF sword or any kind of components of an item, which means that if you go for these trades just to see, it might hurt you a lot more. So you were just saying, you don't want to be too aggro. Yeah, you definitely... but yeah, it's definitely smarter to do this in the earlier parts. And then another thing that I say in a lot of my coaching sessions is that we'll look at runes at the very end. And the reason that I wanted to say that just now, or what reminded me, is because you're running into a lot of mana problems, and there is a way to somewhat fix mana problems as Thresh. So we'll tune into that later to see if you went for that Rune option that will aid your mana issues. Okay, so we just saw you drop your first ward of the game, so now it's kind of the perfect time to talk a little bit about wards.
I think that was my second, actually, because I warded the river brush like the first minute of the game.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about wards. So there's two aspects to wards that I think are really important to understand in the early parts of the game. So we'll let the game play out because I don't think anything's happening right now. But I would say that my first real big rule that I basically always follow as far as warding goes, if the enemy jungler starts bot side, you don't typically have to ward until at least past 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And the reason for that being is because they go from, typically they go from one buff to wolves to their second buff, and then that will lead them around the top side of the map around 3 minutes. And at that point, the only way that they'll come back bot is if they go through the river or they recall and then come back here. So with all of that, it's probably going to be around 4:30, maybe 5 minutes. But just to be safe, you could do a 3:30 ward. The only time that might bite you in the ass is if they have like a J4 level 2 gank or something, but it's really, really uncommon.
Yeah. But with an Echo, I wasn't really worried about it.
And then the other situation would be if they start topside, vice versa, it would be buff, then wolves, then buff, and then you usually want to get your ward around 2:45, 2:50, because the first gank usually happens around 3 minutes. And then the other big aspect about warding that I wanted to talk about is, don't be lazy with your wards. That might be something that you've heard me say before. So, I mean, we saw this ward right here. You place it, I think, right around here. I mean, it's gone now. But just don't be lazy with your wards. Put them in the best place possible. I'm going to have a warding guide out on my YouTube channel soon, so I'll kind of show where exactly the best locations are for each bush. But this bush right here, I mean, it's super common, so it's important to know that right here is going to be your ideal spot.
I think I was going for safety and planting the ward where Mumu is right now.
Yeah. As for this side, when you're putting wards down from the red side, you just want to drop it here. Whereas if you're playing on this side, you want to drop it here. And the reason for that being is because let's say the enemy drops a ward right here and you want to go clear it. In order to clear it, you have to walk up just that little bit further. Whereas if you drop it on this side of the bush or in the middle, that's those little few steps that you don't have to walk in order to clear it. So if you're on red side, put the ward here. Blue side, ward here. Okay, so another thing that, again, we'll pause it so we don't miss anything. But another thing that you could always keep in mind as a support is where your ADC might be gold wise, and that's not really all on you to know when the best time to back is. I try to keep track
of it because I try to skip time my recalls.
But right now, if you see, you guys have a little bit of a CS advantage. And Twitch is sitting on 1,300 gold. You're sitting on 800 gold. Anytime your ADC has a BF sword, it's typically a good idea to back. So when you're getting around this time frame and you guys still haven't recalled, something as simple as typing to your ADC like how long till BF, or if they're not building Infinity Edge, you can ask them how long till your item. Something very simple like that. And instead, you guys kind of stay until you guys are forced to recall. Which I think that's the most common thing to do for most people. They kind of see like, oh, we don't really need to back, so we're just gonna stay. But simply having enough gold for a BF sword before your enemy does, that's a huge advantage in itself. So you guys trade 1 for 1 here.
Mm-hmm. And it goes downhill.
Again, we'll let this play out and then we'll see exactly how it goes. I would also say that this kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. At this point, we're 6, almost 7 minutes in, so everybody else on the map has already done a little bit of their shopping. I think Katarina already had some items. Top and Jungle definitely have some items under their belt. So when this gank breaks out, you guys actually aren't really nearly as strong as them because you haven't yet backed and spent your gold. Had you guys backed, that's an extra BF sword on Twitch. Maybe you're a little bit tankier, you survive that. So that's just another reason to keep track of how much gold you guys have. That's something that is really important later on into the game, and I'll probably mention that a lot later, because a lot of people will have a lot of gold sitting in their pocket and they overstay. That's where the mistake is most common. But it could also be really effective to simply just back and spend your gold, even in the lane phase. So definitely something to keep track of. Okay, so I'll pause it again right here. You've been sitting under this tower for about 20-25 seconds. Now, kind of just last hitting, soaking up some XP, and this is kind of just my opinion. Some other people might disagree with me, but I strongly believe that CS and experience, although very valuable as a whole in League of Legends, aren't going to be the most valuable things in the world for support. So as we backed up here, there was this fight going on this whole time in the jungle. Maybe you just didn't notice that. But even if this fight wasn't breaking out, I still don't think that you sitting under this tower is the most beneficial thing. Like I said, those things are more beneficial for other roles. For support, not so much. So you could have spent that entire 20-25 seconds, whatever it was. Twitch wasn't in lane. You could have been a part of this fight, even if this fight wasn't existent. You could have done a roam mid.
Putting vision down.
You could have roamed mid. You could have tried to maybe 2-man dragon. It's a little bit hard with the Moo, but it's a fire dragon, so that might be worth it. Maybe you roam mid with your jungler. Maybe you get into the enemy jungle, get some vision. There's a lot of options for you to do while your ADC is not in lane that are more effective than just sitting under tower. So I would definitely keep that in the back of your mind anytime you're playing a game and you realize, like, what am I really accomplishing here? And if that answer is I'm just getting XP in CS, immediately that's not really what I want to be doing. I'm going to be more effective elsewhere in the map.
So I think I put a control ward on drag.
Yeah.
And then warded river.
This control ward right here. We can kind of already see. Let's do this.
Can Kat see it if she walks down, or Echo?
I don't know if they could see it. Probably from here.
I was hoping that they wouldn't see it, but I would still get vision.
But if you think about what you just said, if they can't see it, that means you can't see them.
True.
So anytime you're going to put a control ward in the dragon pit, typically I don't think you should put a control ward in the dragon pit unless you plan on doing it yourself. If you plan on just putting it there for vision, then I think just a regular ward is better. But if you are going to put a dragon or a control ward here, I think like right here would be best. If you put it too far out, then you aren't going to cover this backside of the pit. But if you put it right here, you'll get all of this, and then you also get vision of this side as well, which will show you all this fog of war. Okay. I would also say as the game progresses, the state of your lane will also change. So you were unsure of how it was earlier, and we talked about how you can try to gain their respect or see exactly where you stand. And it's also been a few minutes since you guys have really been any active in this lane. I would say the first 5 minutes or so.
They have the advantage at level 6 with both CC and Zaya's alt mobility and the dodge and Twitch just scaling late. So I wasn't trying to make any plays. I was trying to just prevent any engages.
Okay, I was just going to say, as the game progresses, more so just as a general piece of advice, not so much pertaining to this game. But, we were talking about how you don't really know where you stand at the beginning of the game, but that could easily change as the game goes on. So if at this point in any kind of game, not just necessarily this game, if you aren't really sure, you could be a little bit more active. I would also say that trying to be a little bit more consistent would be a good idea. Let me pause this so we don't miss anything. But what I mean by that is the first 5 minutes of the game, you were being super, super aggressive, like looking for hooks, looking for plays, looking for all the kind of plays that you could. And then the last 5 minutes or so, you've been a little bit more passive. And you want to not necessarily keep that aggression up nonstop, but the moment that you decide to pull back and play more passive, the enemy team is not going to be as worried. You always want to keep the enemy on their toes. So just throwing out a hook here and there would have helped. Instead, like I said, the last 5 minutes have been a little bit slow. Now we can go back and look at this just to see if there's anything that
I could have done better.
Yeah, I would say a few things wrong with this play. The first thing that I would point out is another thing that you'll probably hear me say a lot is that it works out in this situation, but it probably wouldn't work out in other situations. So let's back up real quick. Just the lantern itself, if you look,
was it early in it telegraphed?
It was very, very early. And I think the reason it works out is because this is like a low silver bronze game. So their reaction times are simply really, really bad. You kind of walk like, and another thing is you've been playing passive this whole time. The moment you walk up aggressive for the first time in 5 minutes, they should know something's up. So you walk up, you walk to the side, you throw a lantern, then you guys walk all the way over here, and Zaya's taken like 3 steps during that entire time. So again, it works out in this situation. I don't think it would work out in another situation. I don't know if you had, you didn't have a ward. Ideally, you would want a ward there so you know exactly what's going on. So you flay first, you land the hook. So essentially what you guys get here is a bunch of used ultimates for Zaya Flash, which isn't the worst in the world. This is a somewhat hard, difficult lane to gank. And like you pointed out yourself, your ult usage was a little bit bad. Ideally, when you are using your ult, I would say the easiest way of putting it, and that most Thresh mains will tell you, is that you always want to drag them into the box. You don't want to put the box up and hope that they walk into it. You always want to drag them into the box. So as soon as that hook landed, that's your opportunity to instantly pop the box. You're going to be able to drag them into it. Or you can flay them into it. I mean, there's quite a few options. But your Q is probably the easiest usage. As soon as you drop that or land the Q, you could pop your ult. The other thing is,
I forgot about my E damage on my auto attack during that. Yeah, that's why I KS'd.
So 2 main things that I want to talk about right now, as this whole play is still going on. You just brought up KSing. And the biggest thing is KSing is not actually a thing. People in lower ranks always flame people for KSing. It's just really not a thing. It's guaranteeing a kill. So the only time KSing kind of makes sense is if it's a guaranteed kill. Let's say they have an enemy ADC sitting right here with 10 HP. You and your ADC are both there, and you last hit it. That's a KS. Any kind of close situation or somewhat close situation, it's not a KS. That's just guaranteeing your team a kill. They're still going to get assist goal. It's just the worst feeling in the world when the enemy walks away living because you were afraid to KS. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was something that I heard in an interview with Medios the other day. I don't know how much you follow LCS or whatnot, but in an interview with Medios, he said that one of the biggest factors about League of Legends is the fact that you always have to expect or be aware of what's going to happen right now if somebody else shows up. So after this entire gank happened, you guys kind of stuck around a little bit just because you weren't considering the idea that what happens right now if somebody else shows up. So this whole gank played out. You guys didn't get a kill. You got the Zaya Flash. Instantly, you guys probably should have just backed off. Instead, you kind of stuck around in the area a little bit. And then they all showed up, and that's when this huge fight breaks out. So that's just another thing I think really important, worth noting. And it's something that you always want to keep fresh in your mind. Like, okay, we're doing this play right now, but what's going to happen if somebody shows up? And usually that's the jungler.
Echo or Urgot teleports.
Absolutely. So another thing you always just want to keep in the back of your mind.
Can we clear this out and back? Yeah, good. I hope I did correct pathing. I'd be really annoyed with myself if I walked just straight to lane.
Okay, you definitely watched my coaching videos. So you didn't roam here, and it makes sense to me because, there's nobody else on the map for you to attend to. Everybody's up in the top side. So I think that makes sense. Usually I always get on people for not roaming right away, but it makes sense in this situation.
So Echo had already ganked, I think, twice, and so I got rid of the blast cone in order to kind of...
This one right here?
Decrease his pressure, his gank options, really.
I think that as far as blast cones go, there's been a little bit of a debacle as far as, what the best option is, whether you should take them out or destroy them. I think that anytime you're walking by a blast cone on your side of the map, it's typically better to keep it because it will more times than not benefit you than it will benefit the enemy team. Whereas if you're on the enemy side of the jungle, if you're walking by here and there's the blast cone right here or there's the blast cone here, it's typically better to hit it because vice versa, it's more likely to help them than it is to help you. I would also say that here, let's see what happens. My first piece of advice is, I don't know if it actually applies here. Okay, so it does. The first thing that I would say is it's always better, not just on Thresh, but on any champion, to use your guaranteed abilities before you have to use your skill shot abilities. So, for example,
Yeah.
you could have walked up here, just a few more steps,
Flayed her.
flayed first, then used your Q. And that sounds like common sense on Thresh, but I think it's important to note that that's something that is a factor on every single champion. Let me just think of another example. Okay, let's look at Rakan, for example. Why would you waste using your W and take that chance of them flashing, where you could use your R, charm them, and then guarantee the W to land? So it's the same kind of concept with a bunch of champions, but it's really important on Thresh as well. So use your Flay first, then your Q. The other thing that I would point out is once a failed engage happens, you don't continue it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll take a look at items real quick. So you guys do have the item advantage at this point, so I think fighting it is a good idea. But as soon as this fight doesn't work out, you should probably be backing. You miss the hook, you don't have to continue from there. I would say another thing that I see a lot of Thresh players make, in a similar category, is a lot of them, what they do is they'll go for a hook on the Xayah or something, they'll hit it on the minion, and then they'll end up taking the hook into Flay. So,
why?
I mean, it does sound crazy, but a lot of people do. It's kind of the same concept, though, because essentially you're still missing the hook, but you see an opportunity to go in, so you continue to go in. So it's not as crazy as the example that I just gave, but it does have the same purpose as far as you missed a hook, but you go in anyways. And now, if you had your hook now, or all of your
if I have my ult
abilities here, you have a much better chance of actually winning this. So don't be too antsy. That's another problem that a lot of people have in solo queue, is they're always on their toes, which is good. You always want to be on your toes, but they're trying too hard to make things happen and make plays happen. So don't be too antsy. Even when you are on playmakers like Thresh, it's important to be patient, for sure. I would say, again, probably right here, worth noting, you kind of stick around,
I could have roamed mid.
Yeah. Or what you could have done there is, just recalled and then roamed, because you were a little bit low, so it's kind of understandable.
That's still like 15, 20 extra seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the small increments of time can actually go a long way, so definitely important to keep that in mind. And we'll switch our attention back to the bot lane now.
So I directly go bot because I see he's in a 2v1 and I was afraid of them kind of diving.
As well as the tower is really low, so I understand this move here. I like the fact that you are thinking about all of this, though. That does show a lot of improvement. Do you feel like you've actually improved from watching my videos?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
It's given me more things to be aware of.
Okay.
It's helpful.
I'm not trying to float my own boat, toot my own horn, peel my own banana, but
I understand.
For the most part, from the people that I've coached, I get instant feedback saying I climbed a division today. It's just alright, awesome. So I was just wondering if that was the same case just from watching my videos. But yeah, the guy that I coached yesterday, in fact, is up a whole division today. So that's pretty cool.
There you go.
Okay, back to skipping to the mid game. The other thing that I would point out, this lane phase at this point, I'm not really sure you guys win because, again, Twitch is a scaling ADC and they're a little bit ahead overall in this lane so far. Just based off of what we've seen, they've been winning the majority of trades, so you guys are behind. So even if you can't do much in the lane, and aside from roaming, there are still things that you can do on the map. For example, this Fire Dragon has been sitting here for 17 minutes, and I think in just about any other rank besides Silver or Bronze, that probably would have been gone by now.
Definitely.
So just calling for that, as well as maybe you could have called for gank. I mean, I can't see the chat, so I don't know what your kind of communication was, but something as simple as, saying, okay, Xayah ults down, or Xayah flashes down, I have flash, I can lantern flash you in, this is a really good time for gank.
Flashes. I ping similar spells, but not always ults.
Okay.
If they're coming in for a gank, I will say if they don't have an ult, though. And
then on top of that, you can go the extra mile to, just type very quickly as far as what's going on. Sometimes a few words can go a long ways. But again, this Fire Dragon has been sitting here for 18 minutes now. That's definitely something that your team as a whole should be focusing on. And if they're not focusing on it, you could easily communicate with your team. Just type something like, Fire drag up, let's make a play. Something very simple like that. Or or kill bot then drag. Something very, very simple like that. Because
this goes back to what you're talking about of what would happen if somebody else showed up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that could be, whenever you're thinking about that could be something as simple as, should we recall? Should we ward? There's a lot of options. I think right here, all you really needed to do was ward because they were really low, so you guys were in a good position to stay in the lane.
Well, we had a very lazy ward, as you put it.
Yeah. And then the other thing is I would say this is a mistake that most elos have. It's not necessarily just a low elo thing. But support often, or not support, wards often falls onto the support as their responsibility. But it's both you and your ADC's role to drop wards. So if you're out of wards...
I don't mind asking.
Yeah, just make sure you do communicate that. It's good that you're mentioning that you do, because I know a lot of people that are just like too afraid, or I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't ask their ADC to ward. So make sure you are doing that little bit of extra... that little extra step to make sure that you guys have vision. I don't know if you didn't have wards here. Yeah, I don't know if you didn't have wards here. So maybe that was kind of on your fault as well, because you didn't have wards. But even if you didn't, you could have just asked your ADC to drop ward, because he did in fact have ward. Yeah. Roaming top lane. So this is a little bit of a debate that a lot of support players have. Some people just say like completely avoid top. Other people think that it's kind of worth to roam top in some situations. My personal opinion is roaming top is just about a waste of time. As you'll see here. And even if you were to go top and get a kill, you lose so much pressure bot lane. The only reason that roaming mid works is because, typically you have mobility boots on high roaming champions. So you can often make it back bot fairly quickly. Or on the other hand, you go top... Twitch is going to have to blow his flash. He almost dies here. You guys lose the tower. So I would say overall, like as a whole, typically try to not roam top in the early parts of the game. I know there are some high elo players. There's an Alistar main named like Alicopter or something like that, and he's always doing roams top. But just my personal opinion, I don't think roaming top pays off more times than not. So that's what I have to say about that. Do you guys go on to win this game or no?
We do, actually.
Okay, that'll be interesting. So we're reaching the 20-minute mark. So this is the time where I like to talk about my other two big questions. What is your role on the team, and what is your guys' win condition? So let's pause it here so we don't miss anything. I would say that your role on the team, when you're playing...
Heal and shot calling.
Well, shot calling is always kind of what you ideally want to be your role. But when it comes to Thresh, there's a lot of options on the team. You could peel, you can engage, you can disengage. There's so many ways to play Thresh. Whereas, some champions like Soraka, her role every single game is going to be the same. I'm going to sit in the back line and I'm going to heal.
Yeah.
So
can you bring up the scoreboard real quick so I can see who is right? Because I think at this point I see Echo and Cat have enough lead and enough dive that I was like, I just want to keep Twitch alive.
Yeah. I would say that your role in this game, considering you have an Amumu whose sole purpose in League of Legends is to engage, is going to be your main tools of engage. Even with that being said, though, I don't think you guys should be engaging whatsoever. In fact, I think what's best for you guys is a tactic called front to back. I know that's really commonly said in higher ranks. I don't know how often people will talk about that, bronze and silver. But what front to back essentially means is that if you guys dive the back line, you won't be able to kill their back line before they kill yours, which is exactly what this game in this case is. If you go for their back line in Xayah, basically Echo and Katarina are just going to obliterate your back line. So instead, you and Amumu, even though you guys have the tools to engage, should be using all of your CC on their front line to not only protect your ADC, but make sure that you kill their front line first, then move your way to the back line. That's why it's called front to back. So that would be your role in the game, at least this game. The other question is what are your guys' win condition? At this point, you guys are getting absolutely slaughtered. 7k behind. Looks like it's about to be 10 kills behind. So I don't really know how you guys would come back from this game. Apparently you guys do, though. So what is your win condition? And I guess we'll see if that really goes
I was
out.
Hoping for scaling.
Yes.
I knew eventually Cat and Xayah... Well,
I would say, for sure that...
Twitch outscales Xayah, I knew that.
For sure that your guys' win condition in this game from the start was scaling. You have the Twitch, you have the Yasuo, you have the Veigar. So scaling is going to be your friend this game. With that being said, though, had you guys recognized that from the beginning, you would have played a lot more passive. The fact that there's 28 kills in this game in 21 minutes shows that by no means were you guys playing safe and looking to scale. You guys were playing right into what they wanted you to do, which was, play aggressive in the early game, have a lot of skirmishes, because that's when they're going to excel, and that's when they should essentially beat you. Luckily...
This was their mistake, was they weren't taking advantage of their lead properly.
But I would say, you could easily say that they threw, but the fact is you guys put them in a position to throw. It's never ideal to be behind and then try to make a comeback. You always want to be the person ahead. So again, if you guys had just played from your win condition from the beginning, you probably wouldn't be in this position. Luckily, they do throw, but again, it's not the best idea to rely on the enemy team throwing. Another thing that I probably say in just about all of my coaching videos is, sometimes there's a play style that it's kind of needed, even though it might be very, very boring. I know a lot of people don't like to be that person who just sits in lane all day, farms, waits for scaling, waits for late game. But sometimes when you draft the way that you guys did in this game, that's really all you guys can do. That's your only option. When you have a Yasuo,
unless there's some sort of terrible balance in matchups where it's like, oh well, we're dominating lane, so we can be super aggressive.
Yeah, so
because we've already started scaling.
Absolutely. So I would say, sometimes it's better to play safer in the early game if that's really what you guys need. That's not really what people want to hear, but it's better to play safe, play slow, if that means that you guys are going to be winning the game in the long run. So let's jump back to where you are.
I was getting Baron vision because I knew that they would be thinking about trying to get that as an objective. This was just a bad mistake.
Okay, so I'm not going to scold you on this because you can kind of point that out yourself. But what I would say that you were just briefly mentioning is that you were getting Baron vision. Again, if you've watched my videos, you probably heard this before, but I'm just going to repeat it so that it kind of gets embedded in your head. But what I'm talking about is the fact that what is considered your side of the map and what's considered safe changes as the game progresses. So at this point in the game, you guys are kind of limited to your base. If you guys go anywhere outside of that, it's not necessarily a safe place to go. And luckily, you were able to sneak over here, drop some wards very safely, and you got back to base before you kind of just entered over here. But I would say that as a whole, running out here was definitely a sketchy move. You probably could have and should have died just by walking over here. So make sure that when you are getting out here for these wards, that you're with your team. Yeah. I mean, just when I say that something's better, that doesn't mean that you should only ever play those champions. I think that every champion has a niche pick, and if there ever was a time for Thresh, I think this is a good time. Your CC is going to work really well with interrupting Cat's ult. At the same time, Thresh is a really good counter to Rakan because you can flay all of his engages if you are good enough. So I think it definitely does work out. And on top of that, you're tank, so you won't be able to get assassinated as easily if you were playing something like Lulu or Nami. So again, everything has its niche pick. When I say that you should play meta champions, that means ideally if you have these opportunity to, those are the champions that you want to be playing, but not necessarily that you should only play those champions. Okay, let me just back this up real quick to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I missed a hook. That was all you missed, but I was hoping you would keep missing it.
I would say that one issue here, before we even get to the fight, is the fact that you guys are a little bit indecisive about this Baron call. As you see, you guys all are here right now, but as we'll see in a few seconds, Yasuo's running this way, Amumu's running this way. You guys are still over here, now you're auto-attacking Baron. That's another really common way that people throw, is just miscommunication and uncertainty of how they're going to handle objectives.
Look at the pings real quick.
Okay, so you're pinging it, but make sure that you're on the right page.
Twitch was 2.
Okay.
So, and then Yasuo and Amumu just split, and we were like, oh, we don't have a tank anymore, and Yasuo's gone.
Alright, that makes sense.
But what can, other than spam pinging, right? What can I do in order to try to coerce my team to work towards a common goal?
This is what I would say. So you can ping all you want, and that will influence your team, but you can never actually be in a situation where you will guarantee yourself that your team will do exactly what you want them to. And more times than not, if one person disagrees with the call, then it's not going to work out.
That was what I wanted you to address in that Rakan video. That was why we lost.
The easiest example that I could probably offer is, let's say we are in a 45-minute game and you have a Sejuani on your team. And Sejuani engages even though you don't feel that it is a good time to engage. If you guys do not follow her up in this team fight, or let's make it a little bit more of an extreme example. Let's say it's a 60-minute game. And Sejuani goes in. If you guys do not follow her, they will be able to end the game if they kill her in their 4v5. So in those situations, you just have to follow your team. In this situation, you and Twitch wanted to do the Baron, but nobody else on your team did. And everybody was super low. So if you guys don't commit to something, there's a big chance that you guys will end up throwing this. You guys came somewhat close because Xayah and Rakan dished out a lot of damage over here. You guys got lucky to only get away with like 1 or 2 people dying. But that would be my advice for sure. Is even if you feel that something is the best option, you can't really do it unless you're not necessarily your whole team is on page, but the majority of your team is on page. Because if you guys split up with your decision making, you guys are going to put yourself in a really rough situation. Okay, build-wise, I actually can't say anything wrong about it. That's exactly what I would build if I was playing Thresh. After Locket, you can mix things up a little bit. That's when the build kind of changes.
Gets super flexible.
Yeah, I've seen people go Redemption. I've seen people go for Zeeks. I've seen people go for Righteous Glory. Yeah, there's a lot of options. So,
I think I go for Redemption.
You seem like you have a good understanding of statistics with this game, so I don't think I really need to tell you what you should be building because, 32 minutes into this game, you have exactly what I would recommend. So I think you're good as far as that. If you do have questions with build, though, feel free to ask. My personal opinion is you seem pretty set. Let's look at this hook here. Because this is, I think, a good example. Okay, so this fight for your team
I
is...
I over-anticipated her.
Yeah, so this fight for your team was somewhat of a blowout for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't really think that there's anything we can pull away from the fight except for this one play. So we'll speed it up until it happens.
Yeah.
And the reason that I want to bring this up is because this might be common sense to you, and maybe you've heard this before. But I think it's important, worth noting. So anytime that you're playing a champion that is very skill shot reliant, your ideal use of it is when they are up against a wall. That is the perfect situation to use a skill shot because their options are very limited. They can either run straight.
They can only go.
Yeah, they can only run straight or run to the side. And in this case, if they run to the side, they're running straight into your team. This is so vice versa. I think it's also really important to note that whenever you're trying to avoid a skill shot, try to stay away from the wall. But with that being said, you don't really need to overpredict when they're up against a wall because their options are very, very limited. So I know it's really common for Thresh players or Blitzcrank players to look for those flashy plays. People always want to predict where they're going or land the Mad Life for stuff. But whenever they're up against the wall, that's a guaranteed hook for you, 9 times out of 10. So that's why a lot of people you'll hear say that it's a good idea to stay away from the wall. Because it's really hard to avoid skill shots when you're up against the wall. And at the same time, that means that if the enemy team is up against the wall, that should be a hook that you're landing. And again, I think it's important to put emphasis on the fact that you guys won this game simply because the enemy team threw, not necessarily because you played to your win condition. If you guys played to your win condition, that would have meant that you guys tried to stay relatively even. If you fell behind, just slightly behind, and then waited to scale. That was not the case. You guys kind of got lucky. You gave them a huge lead off the beginning, and then luckily they threw. So make sure that when you are in those situations that you are playing to your win condition. And again, I don't think there's too many mechanics that I can pull out in this fight because, again, it's kind of just a stop. I think it's really valuable to look at individual mechanics in really close fights. But as this fight turns out, you guys kind of just completely stop them. Right. You walk up, you land the hook. Your ult's kind of a little bit of a bad usage, but we've already talked about all the situations that you should use your ult. Got a good hook there, but again, I think mechanics are more important to look at in close fights to really be able to tell the difference between what you did good, what you did bad, what you could have done differently. It's more difficult to tell in situations like this when it's just a complete blowout. So this right here is the page that you ran in the game that we just watched. Yep. Resolve first, Inspiration second. Those 2 rune pages are correct. I do recommend a few changes within the pages themselves. Aftershock is what we're sticking with. Pond of Life, correct. Conditioning, correct. Revitalize, I think that Second Wind is probably the best option here. My go-to is always Conditioning and Second Wind if I'm playing any kind of tank champion without heals or shields. If I'm playing any kind of support with heals or shields, I'll go Iron Skin with Revitalize.
Or Mirror Shell.
Mirror Shell or Iron Skin.
Definitely.
So this works on Taric, Soraka. I mean, you don't really take Resolve on Soraka main. Taric and Rakan, it'd be Iron Skin, Revitalize. But Thresh, we don't have those heal shields, so we're going Conditioning with Second Wind. Inspiration, on the other hand, I understand why you're taking Perfect Timing because you want to fit in with the meta with the whole stopwatch usage. So for that reason, I understand Perfect Timing. Futures Market, on the other hand, I've seen it here and there, but overall, I think it's just kind of a troll pick. I don't think that it's quite as useful as some other ones. And as a whole, I think Boots is really, really good. The downside of this is the fact that you won't be able to get mobility boots until 10 minutes. So
that's why I don't do it.
I understand that.
I would do biscuits over magical footwear for sure.
Yeah, so I understand why some people don't do that. The reason that I like this is because it's going to give you a little bit additional movement speed, which will pay off in the long run. You're also saving a little bit of gold. So I think magical footwear works. I think Perfect Timing also works. My ideal rune page would be boots with biscuits. Or even boots with Cosmic Insight. I think Cosmic Insight's really good for playmaking supports. You know, the CDR, the max CDR, the spell down, or the summoner spell CDR, all really good for playmaking potential. So boots with Cosmic Insight works, as well as boots with biscuits. Just because, you know, the biscuits are nice, but it's more or less the permanent max mana that it's going to be giving you. So I think biscuits are a little bit less common on Thresh. Because he doesn't run into the same mana problems that, you know, some caster supports have. But nevertheless, I think biscuits does work. So I would say this is my ideal page setup right here. But stopwatch and biscuits are both viable. But that should just about wrap up everything.